The rain hammered against the tin roof of Bennett's repair and machine shop on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Ohio. Inside, under a single hanging bulb, Claire Bennett knelt beside a broken industrial lathe, her hands black with grease, her ponytail falling loose over her shoulder. She was 34 years old, and she had spent the last 12 of those years rebuilding machines that everyone else had given up on. She didn't know it yet, but in less than 6 months, she would own the very factory that once tried to bury her. This is her story. Claire's father, Walter Bennett, had opened the repair shop back in 1988. He used to say that a machine was never truly dead. It just needed someone patient enough to listen to what was wrong with it. When Walter passed away, Claire was 22, fresh out of a mechanical engineering program at Ohio State, and she made a choice that shocked everyone who knew her. Instead of taking one of the corporate engineering jobs she'd been offered, she came home and kept her father's shop alive. For over a decade, Bennett's Repair had survived on reputation alone. Local machinists, small manufacturers, and even a few desperate factory managers from 3 counties over would bring their broken presses, motors, and conveyor systems to Claire because she could fix what others called unfixable. She never advertised. She never needed to. Word of mouth carried her name across the industrial corridor of the Midwest. But surviving and thriving were two very different things, and Claire knew it. The shop was barely breaking even. Parts were getting more expensive. 2 of her 3 employees had left for steadier work at bigger companies. And looming over all of it, quite literally, was Sterling Industrial, a sprawling manufacturing plant 3 miles down the road that had swallowed up half the town's economy. Sterling Industrial was run by a man named Richard Callaway, a second-generation executive who had inherited the company from his father and spent the last 5 years trying to modernize it into a national supplier of precision parts. Richard was sharp, ambitious, and utterly convinced that anyone still running a small repair shop in the 21st century was either a hobbyist or a fool. He had never met Claire Bennett. That was about to change. It happened at the Cedar Falls County Business Awards, an annual dinner held at the community center that Claire usually skipped. This year, her accountant convinced her to attend, arguing that visibility might attract new clients. Claire wore the only formal dress she owned, sat at a table near the back, and tried not to think about the invoices piling up on her desk. Richard Callaway was the guest of honor, receiving an award for regional business growth. He gave a polished speech about innovation, efficiency, and the future of American manufacturing. Afterward, during the mingling hour, someone introduced him to Claire as the woman who runs that little repair shop on Maple Street. Richard smiled the way men like him always smiled at people they didn't consider competition. "A repair shop?" he said, swirling his drink. "That's charming. Honestly, I didn't think those still existed outside of small towns like this. No offense." "None taken," Claire said evenly. "Somebody has to fix what your factory breaks." A few people nearby chuckled, and Richard's smile tightened just slightly. "We don't break things, Miss Bennett. We build the future. Shops like yours are, let's call it a transitional industry. Give it 10 years, and there won't be a market for hand-repairing machines. Automation will replace people like you before it replaces people like me." Claire held his gaze. "Funny. Your press line broke down for the 3rd time this year, and your maintenance crew called my shop last Tuesday, begging me to come look at it because your automated diagnostic system couldn't figure out what was wrong. I fixed it in 40 minutes. The table went quiet. Richard's jaw tightened, but he laughed it off, raising his glass. "Lucky guess, I'm sure. Enjoy the shrimp, Miss Bennett." He walked away. Claire sat back down, unbothered on the outside, but something inside her had shifted. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was clarity. She finally understood exactly how little men like Richard Calloway thought of people like her, and she decided, quietly, that she was done being underestimated. What Claire didn't know was that Richard's comment wasn't just careless arrogance, it was strategy. Sterling Industrial had been quietly trying to expand its own in-house repair and maintenance division for over a year, and Bennett's Repair, small as it was, kept stealing contracts Richard felt should belong to him. Local machine shops preferred Claire's honest pricing and her refusal to oversell unnecessary parts. Sterling's own maintenance division, by contrast, was bloated, slow, and increasingly automated in ways that looked good on paper but failed in practice. Within weeks, 2 of Claire's regular clients quietly canceled their contracts. Then a supplier she'd worked with for 8 years suddenly raised her parts prices by nearly double, citing new distribution agreements. Claire didn't need to guess who was behind it. Sterling Industrial had leverage across the entire regional supply chain, and Richard was using every bit of it. Her accountant, a steady older man named Frank Delgado, sat her down one evening with the numbers spread across her workbench. "At this rate," Frank said, "you've got maybe 4 months before you can't make payroll." "I'm sorry, Claire." Claire stared at the numbers for a long time. Then she said something that surprised him. "Then I guess I need a bigger shop." Frank blinked. "Claire, you can barely afford this one." "I didn't say I'd buy one," she said. "I said I need one." The opportunity came from an unexpected place. An old contact of Claire's father, a retired industrial broker named Harold Voss, called her out of the blue. He'd heard through the grapevine that Sterling Industrial was quietly offloading its old original plant, the first factory Richard's father had ever built, back in the 1970s, before Sterling expanded into its newer, flashier facility across town. Harold explained the details to Claire over coffee. "It's zoned industrial, full utility hookups, a working crane system, 22,000 square feet. Richard's asking prices low because he just wants it off his balance sheet before the shareholders' meeting next quarter. Whoever buys it gets a real manufacturing facility for pennies on the dollar." Claire's mind was already racing. That plant wasn't just square footage, it was history. It was the birthplace of the very company that had spent months trying to crush her. And it was sitting there, unwanted, practically begging for someone who understood machines to bring it back to life. There was only one problem. Claire didn't have anywhere near the money to buy it. Claire spent the next 3 weeks doing something she'd never done before. She built a business plan. Not for a repair shop, but for something bigger. A regional manufacturing and repair hybrid, a company that could not only fix broken machines, but rebuild and even manufacture replacement parts locally, cutting out the long supply chains that companies like Sterling depended on. She reached out to former clients, machine shop owners, and even competitors of Sterling Industrial, who had grown tired of the company's rising prices and slipping quality control. One by one, she gathered letters of intent, informal promises that if she could get the old plant running, they would bring their business to her. Frank Delgado helped her turn the numbers into a real proposal. Harold Voss, impressed by her seriousness, connected her with a small regional investment group that specialized in funding overlooked manufacturing businesses, the kind of firm that actively looked for founders like Claire, skilled, undercapitalized, and hungry. "I'm not asking you to bet on a business plan," she told them. "I'm asking you to bet on 12 years of proof. I already have the reputation. I already have the clients. All I need is the building." 2 weeks later, the investment group approved funding for 80% of the purchase price, with Claire covering the rest through a small business loan secured against her father's original shop. The purchase was handled through Harold's brokerage, structured carefully so the buyer's identity wasn't disclosed to Sterling Industrial until the deal was finalized. Standard practice for large industrial sales, and something that worked entirely in Claire's favor. Richard Calloway was in a board meeting the day the sale closed. His assistant slipped him a note. Old plant sale finalized. Buyer confirmed as Bennett Repair and Manufacturing, LLC. For a moment, Richard thought it was a clerical error. Then he remembered the woman at the awards dinner. The repair shop on Maple Street. The one he'd told, in front of a room full of people, that her industry wouldn't exist in 10 years. Claire was there when he arrived, standing in the massive open floor of the factory, surrounded by dusty old equipment that hadn't run in years, a hard hat under one arm and blueprints in her hand. Workers she'd hired, 2 of them former Sterling employees who'd been let go in a round of automation-driven layoffs, were already surveying the crane system. Richard stormed in, his expensive shoes echoing against the concrete floor. "You bought my father's plant." "I bought a plant that was sitting empty and losing you money every quarter," Claire said calmly, not looking up from her blueprints. "You said it yourself at that dinner. Automation is the future. I guess you didn't need this old building anymore. This isn't a game, Ms. Bennett. You don't have the resources to run a facility like this." Claire finally looked at him. "I don't have your resources, Mr. Calloway. But I have something you don't. Every client you drove away because you decided honesty and quality cost too much. They're coming to me now. All of them." The months that followed were the hardest of Claire's life, but also the most exhilarating. She and her small crew worked 18-hour days, restoring the old plant's machinery, most of which just needed the same thing every broken machine she'd ever fixed needed: patience and expertise. She brought in her 2 loyal shop employees, hired 3 of Sterling's laid-off machinists, who actually understood the equipment better than anyone Richard currently employed, and slowly, floor by floor, the old factory came back to life. Word spread fast through the tight-knit industrial community. Small manufacturers who'd grown frustrated with Sterling's rising prices and declining service began shifting contracts to Bennett Repair and Manufacturing. Claire didn't try to outmarket Sterling Industrial. She simply did what her father had taught her. She listened to what was broken, and she fixed it, whether that was a machine or a business relationship Sterling had neglected. Meanwhile, at Sterling Industrial, cracks were beginning to show. Automation had cut costs, but it had also cut the flexibility and craftsmanship that mid-sized manufacturers relied on. Clients who needed custom, small batch work, or fast emergency repairs found Sterling's rigid systems too slow and too expensive. One by one, they left. The turning point came at a regional manufacturing expo, almost exactly 1 year after that fateful dinner. Claire had a booth for the first time, showcasing Bennett Repair and Manufacturing's new capabilities, refurbished machinery, custom parts, and a rapid response repair service that had become the fastest in the county. Richard Calloway walked the expo floor that day, and what he saw stopped him cold. Claire's booth wasn't flashy, but it was busy, constantly busy, with representatives from companies he recognized, some of them his own former clients, stopping by to shake her hand and thank her for saving their production lines. He approached her booth near the end of the day, when the crowd had thinned. This time, there was no arrogance in his posture. "You actually did it," he said quietly. "I told you I would," Claire replied. "You just weren't listening. You were too busy assuming I couldn't." Richard was silent for a long moment. Then, in a tone Claire had never heard from him before, he said, "Sterling's maintenance division is failing. Our automated systems can't handle the custom work our smaller clients need. I came here today because I need someone who actually understands machines, not another automated diagnostic system. A person Claire studied him carefully. "Are you asking me for a contract, Mr. Calloway?" "I'm asking you," he said, "if there's any world where Bennett Repair and Manufacturing would take on Sterling Industrial as a client." Claire didn't answer right away. She thought about her father, about the years of scraping by, about the moment Richard had mocked her industry in front of a room full of people who mattered in this town. She thought about the parts price hikes, the canceled contracts, the months of uncertainty that had nearly closed her father's shop for good. She could have said no. Part of her wanted to. But Claire Bennett had built her entire career on one simple principle: fixing what was broken, no matter who it belonged to. Turning away paying work out of spite wasn't good business, and it wasn't who she was. "I'll take the contract," she said finally. "On my terms. Standard pricing, same as every other client. No special treatment, and no special discounts either. You get exactly what everyone else gets, honest work done right." Richard exhaled, something like relief crossing his face. "That's fair. One more thing," Claire added. "The next time you're at an awards dinner, and you meet someone running a small business you've never heard of, don't assume you understand their future better than they do." By the following year, Bennett Repair and Manufacturing had become the most trusted industrial repair and fabrication company in the region, operating out of the very factory where Sterling Industrial had been born decades earlier. Claire had grown her team to 18 employees, several of them former Sterling workers who'd found more stability and respect under her leadership than they ever had before. Sterling Industrial remained a major player in the region, but it no longer dominated the market the way it once had. Richard Calloway, humbled by the experience, restructured his own maintenance division and began focusing Sterling on what it did best: large-scale, automated production, while outsourcing custom and emergency repair work almost entirely to Claire's company. The old plant on the edge of town, once considered a worthless relic destined for demolition, now bore a new sign above its doors: Bennett Repair and Manufacturing, EST 1988, rebuilt forever. Claire kept her father's original shop on Maple Street too, small as it was, using it as a training center for new apprentices. She often told them the same thing her father used to tell her: "A machine is never truly dead. It just needs someone patient enough to listen to what's wrong with it." And,